let's talk about coding style. So the code is actually a way to tell the computer what to do. So in a way, you just write the code. The main idea is that the computer understands what it has to do. For the computer, the code style does not matter. It doesn't matter whether you kind of follow some rules or whatever. The main idea is the syntax would be correct and the statements are the ones you want to write. But usually or always the code requires maintenance and also upgrade. So it's really common that if you write the code, someone, maybe yourself later on, has to upgrade or do some modifications to that code. And for that, it's very important to have a certain rules, or the coding style is really important. So the code style is not important for the computer. Computer only takes the statements and runs them, but it is really important for the developer or the company you are working for. So let's see some different coding style pointers. The one thing is naming variables. Variables in Python are in lowercase letters. Words are separated by underscore. So if you have a variable with 2 words, you can use it, but you just have to use underscore between the words. For example, best score, temperature, and do not use abbreviations. For example, temp or A or B or whatever. The problem is that if you see someone else's code and you see their variables A and B and C and so on, it's very hard to understand. You have to especially check where this value comes from, what's the point of this variable, and so on. So always use meaningful names, and instead of doing some shorter versions of the text or the nouns, use full words. So here also the temp can be temporary or temperature. You don't know what the temp means. Function. Function names are also in lowercase letters. The words are separated by underscore. For example, calculate area or normalize name. So basically the same rules apply as with variable names. Also for variables, it is nice to have not too many parameters. So more than 4 is already seen as not so good. So try to kind of refactor somehow. Maybe the function is too big, so you maybe want to divide it into smaller functions and so on. The name should describe what the function does. So if the function is too complex and you cannot give it a name, then it is already a problem. For example, solve a problem is not a good name for a function. Rather, you just specify what is the problem and what it does. And if the function does too many things, you might want to divide it into smaller functions so you can name those correctly. Not, for example, name is that function calculates the area and also prints out, I don't know, the square into printer or whatever. So if it's a long name and you have too many activities inside this name, it means that your function is probably too big or too complex. It's often nice to keep your function short. So usually about 20 lines of code is maximum. Of course, there are exceptions. There are functions which are hundreds of lines of code and so on. But still, usually, especially in this course, if the code is more than 20 lines, you probably want to refactor something. For example, divide this function into smaller ones, or maybe you are doing it, you're thinking about too complex solution for this problem or something like that. Classes. Names for classes are in camel case, and this means that every word starts with a capital letter. Other letters are lowercase, and words are written together. So, for example, point or university student or HTTP server, written as shown here. So we can use several names, but now we don't use underscore. Every new word starts with a capital letter. So this is also different. We use capital letters for classes. Methods inside classes follow the same rules as functions. So basically they are functions, and now naming convention is basically the same. Spaces. We should use space before and after operators. So for example, I have a simple mathematical formula here. So basically just you have to have a space with, after and before the plus sign here, also the multiplication operator and so on. So basically after and before every operator you have to have a space, single space. Here also I have a variable, but it doesn't change anything. You just have to have space before and after this plus. And also here, assignment also, before and after. We don't use spaces with parentheses. For example, if I have just a function call, I don't put space here. Also, print out something, I don't use space here. Another example, I still use space here and here, but this space here is not because of this starting parenthesis, but this is because of the equals or equal sign here. And same goes here. So this, let me try to get this. Yes, this space here is because of this multiplication symbol here, not because of this parenthesis and so on. But this is something it might be hard in the beginning, but if you write a bit of code, you kind of understand, and in the end it's nothing special. You just get used to this way of writing your code. This is often the same in different languages, but in Python we use it as shown here. Docstring. Docstring is a comment, and it is a comment about the function or method or class or module, and the idea is that we want to describe what the method or function or class does. And we use triple quotes right after the function or the method or whatever declaration. The purpose is to describe what this function does. And it can also be on a single line or in multiple lines. And it is a full sentence. That means that this has to end with a period. And it also cannot be just one word. It should be something which describes this function better than one word. File docstring or module docstring. In the beginning of the file or the module, the docstring describes what this file does. So basically you have a file where you write your code, and in the beginning you just specify that this file does that. Here is an example. So this is a collection of helper functions for string operations, and also some more specific description. And currently this docstring is on multiple lines. For multiple lines, the first line is a summary. So this one here is a summary. And the summary has to be one sentence. So there is one sentence, ends with period, and it takes together what this is really about. And then you have an empty line here, and then you can write more lines as a more specific description. Then there is no limitations of how many empty lines or how many sentences you can use. But the idea is that, yes, you have to have one summary, then you have to have one empty line here, and then you can do whatever you want. Single line docstring. Often this one sentence or this summary sentence is enough. And in those cases you don't have to come up with some nonsense description. You just can use this one sentence as docstring itself. And in this case, we can put those triple quotes on the same line, and they actually have to be on the same line. And here you can see the docstring itself, and of course it has to end with a period, and that is single line or one line docstring. Quotes start and end in the same line, sentence has to end with a period. Function docstring. So written right after function declaration. So you have this function declaration, and after that you write like a comment what this function does or what is it about. Here's an example. Takes maximum value of absolute values. So, and here is the docstring example. So here is the declaration of the function. So the name and the parameters here and the type hint, so what data type it returns. And now we describe what this function does. It's also important to see that there is this indentation is important. So because it's already a part of this function, it already has to have this indentation. Now we have a summary line here, so it takes everything together, and now some specific information, for example, how it's working or what is used here and so on. But the first sentence should be like the main summary. And now also the contents or the body of this function is shown here. Single line docstring. So basically single line docstring, as already mentioned, is written to one line. Just an example for the function. Basically everything is the same. You just write this single line docstring in one line just right after the declaration of this function. Everything basically is the same. Class docstring. So class itself has a docstring, and also every method or every function inside it has docstring. So here is an example of a class student. And again, after the declaration or the first line of the class, we write a docstring for this class. So basically it's just a student in university. And now I have a method here, getAverageGrade, which calculates the average grade of the student. Also multi-line docstring, I have first one as the summary line, and then I have more description here. Okay, I don't have the body of the method shown here, but yeah, there can be some return something and some calculations here. And yeah, both single or multi-line docstrings are allowed. Here I have just an example of single line here and multi-line here, but they both can be single lines or both can be multi-line docstrings, doesn't matter. Style of docstring. So as I mentioned, the docstring contents has to be a full sentence or full sentences. The first line should be in imperative mood. So this means that it should be as a command rather than a description. So the good examples are return sum or calculate area. So you basically are telling what to do. So this function has to return a sum or this has to calculate an area. But do not use returns sum, which is a description. Also, this function calculates an area and so on. This is also pointed out at certain points. If you use something like that, return sum, you might get an error from our system. Of course, it doesn't matter, the code works still. The code does. For computer, this docstring doesn't matter at all. This is for the other developers, but our style check, which comes with our exercises, actually checks the contents of this docstring. So you have to use this imperative mode. General style requirements. In the end of the file, you have to have one empty line, and this empty line has to be it has to be empty also. So if your code cannot end with a statement, you just have to press an enter and have an empty line there. Before each function you have to have 2 empty lines. Also, if you have more or less, you will get an error about this from our system. And 1 empty line between a summary line and a longer description inside a multi-line docstring. I already showed that before. No trailing spaces in any line. So if you have a statement or some expression, you cannot add spaces after that required code. So this is also pointed out if you have some lines which have spaces, pointless spaces in the end. Different standards. Mainly two standards are used. We also use it in our course. This is PEP 8 and PEP 257. The first one is mainly about how to write the syntax or how to write the code, the spaces here and there and the empty lines. The other one is for docstrings. So this is where the imperative mood and different checks are coming from. When you submit your code, the style is checked according to those rules. And the result or email or wherever you check your results, this points out all the style errors you have in your code. And you can fix them and submit again. Here's an example of style errors in one result. And as you can see, it points out the file where this error occurs, the line, and also the position or the basically column where this error occurred. And then you have also the description of the error. And the description of the error also has the error code. And you can use this code or description to search online, for example, about this error, or ask other students or ask the teachers. But in the beginning, I know it's really hard. You probably will get a lot of errors, but as you go on, the more you program, the easier it gets to kind of follow those rules. And I'm pretty certain if you think about it, after a few weeks, it's really easy to not make any mistakes at all. So you can submit your code without having any style errors. You can even take it as a challenge. Try to write as stylish code as possible, so that if you submit it to our system, you won't get any style errors. In the beginning, it seems hard, but in the end, you will see that it comes automatically. You don't have to do anything special to follow those rules.